student under Dr. Amir in the Department of Environment, Faculty of Forestry and Environment. This morning, I'll be talking on a very important topic when it comes to research, which is questionnaire development under research methodology. First, I would like to say that according to I.M. Crawford in 1997, no survey can achieve success without a well-designed questionnaire. This is because questionnaire is very important. That is the tool. And you cannot go to war or you cannot go to work without a good tool. If your working tool is bad, definitely you're going to have a very bad day at work. The agenda of this presentation is as follows. We'll have introduction, then we'll look at developing the items where we'll run through the steps, and then we'll talk about validity of the questionnaire developed. We'll also look at the reliability of the questionnaire, and finally, I'll conclude. The objective of this presentation is three. The first one is to understand the attributes of a well-designed questionnaire. What are the things that a well-designed questionnaire we have? What are the things that we can look at and say, yes, this questionnaire is well designed? Two is to adopt a framework for developing questionnaires. I believe and I'm hoping that at the end of the session, one, every participant would be able to adopt a framework that, okay, this is how I want to go about designing my questionnaire. Finally, to look at the test of reliability and validity of the questionnaire. Introduction. First of all, I would like to ask, what is a questionnaire? Pollitt and Beck in 2006 defined a questionnaire as an instrument for collecting respondents' self-report information about their knowledge, attitude, feelings, and beliefs. The questionnaires are used to gather first-hand information from large audience. There are so many definitions, but for me, this is encompassing. We can't talk about questionnaire development without first asking, what are the sources of the questionnaire? The first source of questionnaire is by adoption. In adoption, the researcher may choose to adopt entirely a developed and tested questionnaire by researchers after seeking permissions to use them from the originator of the questionnaire, and such permission must be granted before it could be used. Adoption is all about taking that which has been used, tested by past researcher, but we have to be careful to ensure that we seek permission. We know about piracy and the rest of them, and of course, the Turnitin test and all that. We need to seek permission, and the permission has to be granted. Here I have a sample of a permission granted form in form of mail to a seeking researcher who wants to adopt questionnaire already developed by someone else. Another source of questionnaire is adaptation. In adaptation, the researcher will extract questions from several previously developed instruments to form his own questionnaire. We need to understand the difference here. Adoption, you are taking the complete questionnaire that have been used and tested. Adaptation, you are taking elements, parts, you are taking informations. You are adapting, you are not taking the whole, you are taking part of the information. And after the adaptation, for many existing questionnaires, it is important to now check the validity and reliability of this new questionnaire. In adoption, it has been tested and okay. In adoption, because you are taking elements from different questionnaires, you are more like creating something new from existing something, okay? So it's important that you have to test the reliability and the validity after you have come up with this. And the last source of questionnaire is development, which is a huge task. And most times when we are looking at doing work that is novel, that is not very common, when we are thinking of doing new things, most times we will have to develop our questionnaire. In questionnaire development, the researcher will use his own skills and experience based on the objective of his study. This is key, and develop questionnaire that will help to elicit information which will assist him in achieving his research objectives. This is the most difficult type, where tests and retests must be conducted, and validity as well as reliability must be determined before it could be used. Of course, we can understand doing something new, developing something from beginning is always tough. Unlike the one that has been developed and used, or the ones that have been developed, you just pick elements from them. Here you ask, so you have to test and retest while you are developing. We are still going to look into that as we progress in our questionnaire development to make sure that the objective of the study is captured. This is key. If questionnaires cannot capture the objective of the study, answer the research questions, then it's of no use. My introduction continues. Let's look at types of questionnaire. When we talk about types of questionnaire, first of all, let's look at the type based on the question used. Though I will not be dwelling so deep into this because this is a recap of tips on good questionnaire questions that was presented some time ago by Abdul Karim on 12th November 2020. That is on YouTube. Anybody can refer to that. Based on the types of questions used, we have structured questionnaire, unstructured questionnaire, and scaled questionnaire. Then based on the formats used, we have open-ended format, closed-ended format, mixed questionnaire, and pictorial questionnaire. When you look at the closed-ended format, it can be further broken into parts. Leading question, importance question, Likert questions, dichotomous questions, bipolar questions, rating scale questions, and buying propensity questions. Like I said, this is just a recap of a seminar that was given. The presenter dealt extensively on this topic, and I would advise anybody to refer back to the presentation of 12th of November 2020. Let's look at developing a questionnaire, developing the items. You have to begin with the end in mind, first thing first. The design of a questionnaire will depend on whether the researcher wishes to collect exploratory, that is qualitative information, or quantitative, what you intend to do. The final goal has to come in mind from the beginning. The first step in developing the items of questionnaire is to design what is my final goal? What kind of information do I want to elicit? Do I want qualitative or quantitative, or is it both? So exploratory questionnaires use data to collect qualitative information. It's usually unstructured questionnaire, or the formal standardized questionnaires, if the data to be collected is quantitative, usually have structured questionnaires here. Formal standardized questionnaires are generally characterized by prescribed wording and order of questions to ensure that each respondent received the same stimuli. Prescribed definition or explanation for each question to ensure interviewers handle questions consistently and can answer respondent requests for clarification if they occur. And finally, prescribed response format to enable rapid completion of questionnaire during the interviewing process. Now, looking at I'm still on developing the items, looking at the quality of a good questionnaire, we all think differently. So there is no actually hard and fast rules about how to design a questionnaire, but there are a number of points that must be borne in mind. Somebody said questionnaire development is an art, not a science, because there are no theories that you have to obey, but there is a lot of do's and don'ts. These are points that you have to consider. I have some that I have itemized here. The first one is, if you want to design a questionnaire, you must consider, very importantly, the research objective. The questionnaire must meet research objectives. Avoid omitting important aspects or inadequate probe of particular issues in the objective. This is a common mistake that happens with a lot of researchers. 2, it has to be complete and accurate. It should obtain the most complete and accurate information possible. Ensure that the respondent fully understands questions and are not likely to refuse to answer, lie to the interviewer, or try to conceal the attribute by organization and wording. Here, you have to ensure that the questionnaire is complete and it has to be organized using the words and the format that will enable your respondents to open up and speak without lying or deceiving or without feeling bored or tired. We are still going to look at how this can be achieved as we go on. The third one is simplicity. You have to make it simple. Make it easy for respondent to give necessary information and for the interviewer to record the answer, and it should be arranged so that sound analysis and interpretations are possible. In this simplicity, you are considering both on the side of the respondents and on the side of the researcher. It should be simple enough for the researcher to extrapolate information, data, and do analysis, and it should also be simple enough for the respondents to understand and respond. So the simplicity applies to the two ends. And finally, arrangement. It would keep the interview brief and to the point and be so arranged that the respondent remain interested throughout. What happens here, the other time I said you have to make sure that you keep your respondent interested in the questionnaire. They don't get bored. Sometimes when you give people questionnaires to answer and if it's not well prepared, midway into the questionnaire, they are like, they are tired. You see them checking their time or looking at other things they need to do, and they're like, this is wasting my time and all that. But if a questionnaire is well arranged, it will enable them to stay true and respond properly. Preliminary decisions in questionnaire design. Here we are going to look at 9 steps that we have to follow in designing the questionnaire. The first step is you need to decide the information that is required. I said this before. Are you looking at qualitative, quantitative, or the mixture? You need to decide the information that is required. The next step is define the target respondents. Who are you looking at? You already know the information that is required. Now, who are going to be your respondent? Elderly people, young people, little children of school age, working class people, are they busy people, managers, public servants? Decide. You have to define the target respondent. This is going to guide in other steps because the kind of questionnaire you administer to young school children would definitely be different from the kind of questionnaire you give to experts in the field. So the target respondents is the next step you must consider if you are going to design a very good questionnaire. The third one is you have to choose the method of reaching the target respondents. What are the methods you want to use to reach them? We'll still look at all the steps as we progress. The fourth one is you have to decide on the questionnaire, the question content itself. The content is very key because this the content that will either sustain your respondents to give you valid and true answer, and it's also the content that can bore them and piss them off. Is the content that will make them to also lie to you. Develop the question wording. You can never get a good result out of the questionnaire process if the wording is not well developed. The next step is to put the question into meaningful order and format. Sometimes you can have good questions, you can have good information, you already know your target audience, you already know how you want to get them. If the arrangement is not proper, the whole aim will still be defeated. The next one is check the length of the questionnaire. How long is the questionnaire? You need to, after you have put it into meaningful order and format, you have to check the length. You have to see if there are things that should be taken off, if they are not primary to the objective of the research. If without those part of the questions, the objective of the research will still be achieved. You need to see if you have to bring it down, reduce a bit, or make it long a bit. You need to see. Next one is after you have done, you know your target audience, you have defined them, you know the information required, you have chosen the method, you have the question content, you have a good wording, it's in good format, the length is okay. You now have to pre-test. Remember, we said in the beginning that under questionnaire by development, that test and retest have to go on until we achieve a very good questionnaire. So here you have to test, and also in this testing too, after you have tested the questions and the informations and everything, and it's okay, this is also where you're going to test for the reliability and validity as well. It's about testing. If the reliability and validity is okay, if the question contents are okay, then we can now say, okay, fine. We have developed a final survey, final questionnaire. Now let's look at this test because that is the bulk of our presentation this morning. The first, we said, decide on the information that is required. First thing first, it should be noted that one does not start by writing questions. I know we're talking about questionnaire, but you do not start questionnaire by writing questions. The first step to decide what are the things one needs to know from the respondent in order to meet the survey objectives. You have to first sit down and think. You have your objectives already. You have to think. It's not, you don't just jump into writing the questionnaire, the questions of your questionnaire. You have to think, what are the things? What are the things that will meet these objectives? Because the objective is the aim of the whole research. So what are the things that will meet it? The first thing first, you have to note, you have to decide, you have to think, you have to brainstorm. Next is, what are they? They should appear in research brief and research proposal. Check your research proposal, check your research brief. That's where you find the objectives. And the objectives is the guide to determining the information that is required. And if you need more help, one may already have an idea about the kind of information to be collected. Additional help can be obtained from secondary data, previous rapid rural appraisals and others. You know, if you have known what you need, okay, and you already coming up with kind of idea of the kind of things you need before developing yours, secondary data from other previous work by other researchers can also help. Also, then you need to know, in respect of secondary data, the researcher should be aware of what work has been done on the same or similar problem in the past. What factors have not yet been examined? That is the gap. And how the present survey question can build on what has already been. So in case, while deciding what your questionnaire content is going to be, you ended up needing secondary data, you have to look at the factors, these things. You have to look at the gap, what has not been met, and you have to look at how you can build to get it. And a small number of preliminary information interviews with target respondents will give a glimpse of reality, what may help in clarifying ideas about information required. What we're trying to say here is, when you have, because this stage we are deciding, we are still at decision stage, which is the very first stage. Nothing stops you from gathering a few target respondents and asking them questions in line with your objectives. At this stage, you haven't started writing your questionnaire, but you are trying to build, you are trying to decide what the content is going to be. You can interview them. The next step after this is to define the target respondents. There are many respondents for a questionnaire design. Maybe you want to do a research in the market. In the market, there are so many people. You have the wholesalers, you have the retailers, you have the buyers, you have the shop owners, you have market. Your research is based on market. But at this stage now, you have to define who the target, the exact people that you aim to conduct your research on. At the outset, the researcher must define the population about which he or she wishes to generalize from the sample data collected. For example, in econometrics, researchers often have to decide whether they should cover only existing users or include non-users. You know, sorry, that's my field. In econometrics, we keep looking at how to get value-added services, value-added product, and So most times you have to decide, this research I'm going to do, should I focus on only the users? Maybe you're talking about waste management from economic metric point of view. Are you talking about those people that are the ones generating the waste? Or are you also talking about those that are affected by what those people are? You need to decide. Then the second, researcher have to draw up sampling frame. And finally, in designing the questionnaire, we must take account of the social demographic data, such as the age, education, and type. These are the things that help you in defining your target respondents. The next step is to choose the method of reaching target respondents. This is important because most method of contact will influence not only the questions the researcher is able to ask, but the phrasing of those questions. If you're going to have a face-to-face interview, the phrasing of the questions will certainly not be exactly as if you're going to send email. Okay, the main method of reaching respondent in survey research are one, personal interviews, then group or focus interviews. If you're having a personal interview, you know how personal interview questions can go. And if it's a question that will be addressed to group, are you going to mail it to them? And the last one is telephone interview. These are the common. The first two mentioned are the most extensively than the other second pair. However, each has its own advantage and disadvantages. A general rule is that the more sensitive or personal the information, the more likely the answer you're going to be, and the more you have to be careful in the designing, okay? Because the form of data you're going to collect will be determined by how you intend to reach your respondents. Now, after this has been done, the next is to decide on question content. Be prepared to ask, is this question really needed? Remember I said the guiding factor here is the research objective. So putting the research objective side by side, a lot of questions that you are developing, you need to each time ask, this question, is it needed? Will it? Okay, the temptation to include questions without critically evaluating their contribution towards the achievement of the research objective is usually strong. A lot of times, after you have first secondary data, you have interviewed least proportion of respondents, you have brainstormed, you have done focus group discussion and all that, a lot of questions will come up. You have to resist taking questions that will not contribute towards the achievement of the research. And aspect of research is the research objectives. No question should be included unless the data it gives would be of use in testing one or more of the hypotheses established during the research design. Avoid redundant questions as much as possible. Questions that are just there, they contribute to the questionnaire, but their effect, their usefulness to the research objectives, meeting the hypothesis is very low. Developing the question wording. Here, we have different kind of questionnaires. We have the closed questions. In this, respondents choose from a distinct set of predefined research, such as yes or no. Advantage of closed questions is that respondents find it easy. It's easy. The respondent has easy method of indicating his answer. He does not have to think about anything. Then he prompts the respondent so that the respondent has to really rely less on memory. Like I said, no much brainstorming because you already give the option like yes or no. Responses can be easily classified, making analysis very straightforward. And then they permit respondent to specify the categories that is most stable for them. The disadvantage is that they do not allow the respondent the opportunity to give different response especially from the one you have suggested. And they suggest answers that respondent may have considered before. It doesn't give the respondent the opportunity to, express, because you already guided, you have provided guideline, you give, like when you say yes or no, the person that going out of it does not flow. Then we have open-ended questions. This is under developing the question wording. In this one, the respondent relies in his or her own words. No answers are suggested. The first advantage is that no influence by any specific alternative of the interviewer. 2, they often review the issues which are most important to the respondent and also finding which were not originally anticipated. Because we are all different, we are different people, we think differently. When you are designing your questionnaire, there might have been some things that you didn't even consider, but because it's an open-ended question that gives the respondent opportunity to express his or herself, there might be new findings. The respondent can qualify their answers or emphasize the strength of their opinion. You are giving them the opportunity to express themselves. So here you can see the emphasis, you can also get new ideas, but there are a lot of disadvantages. The first one is that the respondent may find it difficult to articulate their responses. 2, respondent may not give a full answer simply because they may have forgotten to mention important points. The third one is that data collected in this form of verbatim comment, it has to be coded and reduced to manageable category, the data handling. Then the fourth one is that respondent will tend to answer open questions in different dimensions. So it gives the researcher so much things to do. But we have open response question. This open response question is actually a combination. This is both open-ended and closed-ended, and includes specific response questions as well. Advantage here is that the researcher can avoid the potential problem of poor memory or poor articulation by then subsequently being able to prompt respondent into considering particular response options. Second one is that recording during the interview is relatively straightforward, because where you think there are going to be issues, you can apply closed-ended questions there. And when you think that the respondent will give answers that are clear for you to understand, you can apply open-ended questions there. The disadvantage is that it requires the researcher to have a good prior knowledge of the subject in order to generate realistic, likely response options before printing the questionnaire. The next one is putting the question into a meaningful order and format. Opening questions. When you have gotten the questions, you have your target respondent, you have the question content, you've gotten the right question content, you have been able to use the right wording. You have gathered, these are all raw materials. Remember, we are trying to develop a questionnaire. We are trying to create something. So all we have been doing before now is to get the materials that we're going to use to build the questionnaire. Now, the first thing is you have to arrange into meaningful order and format. There are some questions that should come at the beginning. There are some questions that have to come in the middle. There are some questions that have to come. You don't bring questions that's supposed to come towards the end to the beginning. It will defeat the purpose. Most times it can even throw the respondent off. You need to organize in a very meaningful order and format in a way that even the respondent will feel comfortable answering through. Okay, there are open questions. Opening questions should be easy to answer and not in any way threatening to nobody responds well to threatening conditions. The first question is crucial because it is the respondent's first exposure to the interview, and it sets the tone for the nature of the task to be performed. The question flow. Questions should flow in some kind of psychological order so that one leads easily and naturally to the other. Question variety. Respondents become bored quickly and restless when asked similar questions for half an hour or so. It usually improves response, therefore, to vary the respondent's task from time to time. We know about being bored. We know about monotony. When you keep asking somebody the similar some questions, for like 30 minutes and above, the person will feel bored and might not. At the beginning, I told you we need to consider things that can make respondent to stay calm and flow through in our development. Then closing questions, like I said before, there are questions that should come at the beginning. There are some that should come at the end. Respondents become increasingly indifferent to the questionnaire as it nears the end. We need to know this. Because of impatience or fatigue, respondents may give careless answer to the later questions. So those questions that are of special importance should, if possible, be included in the earlier part of the questionnaire. Potentially sensitive questions should be left to the end to avoid respondent cutting off the interview before important information is collected. Presentation and layout of the interview form must be considered, and please make your task as straightforward as possible. Questions should be clearly worded and response options clearly identified. Prescribed definition and explanation should be provided. When you check some questionnaires, you will see sometimes before questions are introduced, terms are explained to help the respondent. This ensures that the questions are handled consistently by all interviewers, and that during the interview process, the interviewer can answer and clarify respondent queries. Ample writing space should be allowed to record open-ended answers. If there are open-ended questions, you should give enough space, and to cater for differences in handwriting between interviewers. All this is what you need to consider in making meaningful order and format. Now, after this is done, the next thing we said, you have to check the length and the physical appearance. You have to check the length and the physical appearance of the questionnaire that is being designed. The physical appearance of a questionnaire can have significant effect upon both the quantity and quality of data obtained. The quantity of data is a function of the response rate. In general, it is best for a questionnaire to be as short as possible. A long questionnaire leads to a long interview, and this is open to dangers of boredom on the part of respondent and poorly considered hurried answers, interruption by third parties, and greater cost in terms of interviewing time and resources. These are the things that we can consider to get a very good questionnaire in terms of physical appearance and length. You can use the use of booklets. The booklet in the place of loose or stable sheet of paper make it easier for interviewer or respondent to progress through the document. Moreover, fewer pages tend to get lost. A lot of people will be using sheet of papers that are flying around. Why not organize them into a booklet? The simple and clear format, the clarity of questionnaire presentation can also help to improve the ease with which the interviewer or respondent are able to complete a questionnaire. Creative use of space and typeface. In their anxiety to reduce the number of pages of a questionnaire, this is a tendency to put too much information on a page. This is counterproductive since it gives the questionnaire the appearance of being complicated. Questionnaires that make use of blank space appear easier to use, enjoy higher response rates, and contain fewer errors when completed. The use of color coding. Color coding can help in administration of questionnaires. It is often the case that several types of respondents are included within a single survey, e.g. wholesalers and retailers. Printing the questionnaire on two different colors of paper can make it handling easier. Okay, the interviewer instructions. Interviewer instructions should be placed alongside the questions to which they pertain. Instructions on where the interviewer should probe for more information or how replies should be recorded are placed after the question. After we have followed the first 7 steps, then we have to pilot the questionnaire. That is the testing. And of course, from piloting the questionnaire, we move to the final step, which is developing the final form. Now, looking at piloting, until it has actually been used in interviews with respondents, it is impossible to say whether it is going to achieve the desired result. Pre-testing helps to identify any mistakes that need correcting. These are the things that pre-testing your questionnaire will do for you. It will check whether the questions are they awarded will achieve the desired result, whether the questions have been placed in the best order, whether the questions are understood by all classes of respondents, whether additional or specific questions are needed, or whether some questions should be eliminated, whether the instructions to the interviewers are adequate, and of course, it will also check the reliability and validity of the questionnaire. Usually, a small number of respondents are selected for the pretest. The respondents selected for the pilot survey should be broadly representative of the type of respondents to be interviewed in the main survey. This is very important. If the questionnaire has been subjected to a thorough pilot test, the final form of the questions and the questionnaire we have evolved in its final form, that remains to be done in mechanical process of laying out and setting up the questionnaire in its final form. Then we would have, and then involve grouping and sequencing the question into appropriate order, number of the questions, and also inserting instructions. Then we can, if we consider all these things, the arrangement, the question content, the physical appearance, the length, and then the piloting the questionnaire goes well, then we have our final questionnaire ready to use for use. From here, the question will now come, okay, now you have been able to get a good questionnaire. Is it valid and reliable? Reliability and validity are two important qualities of a questionnaire. There are different statistical ways to measure the reliability and validity of a questionnaire. The statistical choice often depends on the design and purpose of the questionnaire. What is questionnaire reliability? It also describes consistency. Questionnaire reliability is the extent to which the same questionnaire will produce the same result if the study was to be conducted again under the same condition. Reliability is assessed by 1. Test-retest reliability. This involves giving the questionnaire to the same group of respondents at a later point in time and repeating the research. Then, comparing the responses at the two time points. This type of reliability test has a disadvantage caused by memory effect. If the respondent responded to the question in this way they were remembered answering the first time, it may provide researcher with an artificial reliability. Thus, to reduce memory effect, the time between the first test and the retest should be increased. I want to believe this is self-explanatory. If you are retesting something, you just give people questionnaire to answer, and within a short time you come back. Human beings, we have tendency of memorizing things very fast, especially when they are easy things. They will most likely give you an artificial reliability. But if you allow a sizable portion of time before administering it back in the test-to-test, it will help you to get a better result. We also have inter-rater reliability. Like the test-retest reliability, it is conducted under different conditions. The raters are different, with one being systematically harsher than the other. And we have parallel form reliability. Here, parallel equivalent forms of the questionnaire are developed. That is, you have parallel equivalent forms. They are the same questionnaire, but maybe the format of the question arrangement are different, A and B. They are equivalent, okay? Both forms will be used to get the same information, but the questions will be constructed differently. Respondents are to fill both forms of questionnaire based on the assumption that both forms are interchangeable. The correlation of the two forms estimates the reliability of the questionnaire. A disadvantage of this checker is that it is very expensive. The last one is split half reliability. Split half reliability measures the extent to which the questions all measure the same underlying construct. Here, the questions are split in two halves, and then the correlation of the scores on the scales from the two halves is calculated. Afterwards, the calculated correlation is run through Spearman-Brown formula. Let's look at questionnaire validity. What is questionnaire validity? Questionnaire validity measures the degree of agreement of the result or conclusions gotten from the research questionnaire with the real world. Now, let's consider the steps in validating a questionnaire. The first thing is to establish face validity. Here, you get experts on the field to check if topic under investigation is effectively captured, and also check for double, confusing, and leading questions. The next step is to conduct a pilot test. This will determine what questions are irrelevant, and those that are not, drop the irrelevant questions. After this is done, you enter the pilot test in a spreadsheet, clean the data, dive the task of data entry encode the data, check for maximum and minimum value for all data, enter considering the Likert scale used. Next one is to use principal component analysis, PCA. This PCA helps to identify underlying component values ranging from -1 to +1. Look for values that are plus or minus 0.6 or higher when grouping. And from here, you check the internal consistency of the question loading onto the same factors. This one will help you to determine the correlation between questions loading onto the same factor and check if the responses are consistent. A standard test of Cronbach alpha. Cronbach alpha values range from 0 to 1, but a value from 0.6 to 0.7 is acceptable. And then finally, you reverse the questionnaire based on information from PCA and Cronbach alpha, that is CA. Analyze any important question that does not adequately load onto a factor separately. Remove unimportant questions. Also, if removing a question increases the CA of a group question, then you can also remove it from the factor loading group. Repeat the pilot test if there are major changes. And this is the conclusion of my presentation this morning. 1. A well-designed questionnaire is essential to a successful survey. However, the researcher must develop his or her own intuition with respect to what constitutes good design, since there are no theories of questions to guide him or her. 2, a good questionnaire is one which helps directly to achieve the research objectives, provide complete and accurate information, is easy for both interviewers and respondents to complete, and is so designed as to make sound analysis and interpretation possible and brief. There are at least 9 distinct steps. You have to decide on the information required, define the target respondent, select the method of reaching the respondent, determine the question content, word the questions, sequence the questions, check the questionnaire length, pretest the questionnaire, and finally develop the final questionnaire. And of course, a good questionnaire should be able to establish qualities of reliability and validity for it to be able to produce correct information concerning a particular topic. If a questionnaire used to conduct a study lacks these 2 very important characteristics, then the conclusion drawn from that particular study can be referred to as invalid. This often means the study needs to be conducted again. I want to thank you so much for listening to me.